New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is still refusing to resign amid allegations by 6 women of sexual harassment and inappropriate behavior. Cuomo has acknowledged acting in ways that have made people uncomfortable, he says, while denying one allegation that he groped a current staffer in the executive mansion. Still, most of New York's congressional delegation has called on the governor to resign, including Senators Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand, while lawmakers at the state level have opened an impeachment inquiry. Back with me are Soledad O'Brien and Kimberly Atkins. And joining us is Jill Wine Banks, former assistant Watergate special prosecutor. Jill and Kimberly are also co-hosts of the #SistersInLaw podcast. All, thank you very much for, 2 of you coming back to the show. Jill, for coming on the show. I'm just going to open the floor to all of you and just your reactions to not only the allegations against Governor Cuomo, but Governor Cuomo's insistence on not resigning, even though now half of the legislature in Albany has called on him to resign. Jill, you start.
This will be controversial, but I agree that he should have a full investigation. He is due process, and he should have that process, whether it's through the impeachment by his own state, whether it's through the investigation by outside counsel. We need to know all the facts. The facts as they are appearing, both in terms of his being a bully to men and women, and to behaving in what is clearly inappropriate manners toward women. One of the most powerful pieces I read was by an Albany reporter, Miss Bateman. And it really was one of those aha moments where I went, I really get how toxic the environment is, but it's not just for women. Her situation was as a woman, and any woman reading that is going to get it. It could start a movement, but I think we have to wait for the full investigation. And then he is right. He was elected by the people, and Democrats tend to respond immediately, get out, get out, get out. Mm-hmm. Let's hear the full side. I'm a litigator. There are 2 sides to a pancake, no matter how thin you make it.
That is a good analogy. But I have to say, Governor Cuomo is saying that, part of this is that I am not part of the political club. He's a Cuomo. I mean, come on. He is the club. Kimberly, your reaction to what's happening with the governor.
Yeah, and I think that point is so important to the coda that I will add to Jill. I won't say that I'm disagreeing. Of course, people need to be evaluated and they need to be investigations. But I think one thing we have to keep in mind is the issue of power. Of course, the governor saying he's not part of the political class is nonsense. He, in this really powerful story that Jill mentioned by Jessica Bakeman, I think really reinforces the abuse of power that is inherent in so many of these allegations. And so when you're looking at this investigation, it is false to claim that Governor Cuomo and the women who are accused of him stand in the same power dynamic. Of course, he has an extraordinarily bigger power dynamic in play, even as this investigation plays out. He had an uneven power dynamic in play in each of these allegations that move forward. That's what allows powerful people who know they have that power to try to intimidate women, to try to make women uncomfortable. I was not in New York, but I was a young State House reporter covering a governor when I was in my 20s. And if I was subjected to what Jessica Bakeman describes in this article, not only would that have unnerved me, that would have probably shaken me to my core, it may have changed the trajectory of my career, that perhaps I might have even stopped covering politics if I was in an environment that was that uncomfortable, that was that toxic. And I think that's the one thing you need to keep in mind. Yes, hear out the facts, but don't, I'm really nervous that this whole idea of, well, he's denying it and he won't step down is turned into a shield to keep from holding him and other people like him accountable when they do engage in wrongdoing.
Well, Soledad, I mean, that's one of the things. Could Andrew Cuomo do what Governor Northam in Virginia did, and other politicians who find themselves in similar situations, quote unquote, brazen it out? Just ignore everybody and stay in power. Your reaction to what's happening with Governor Cuomo?
He surely could. And listen, I agree. I think either you have due process or you don't. And I think actually an investigation is very important because clearly the allegations and what seems to be at least early evidence of a serial harasser, potentially, it's very concerning. Who were the enablers of this? When you read these women's stories, there are also people involved who moved things into place to make things happen. And so I'd be curious about the results of an investigation as well. Yeah, you can absolutely brazen it out to a certain point, but then at some point the political weight becomes very heavy. You could argue that Governor Cuomo has been brazening it out for a little while. I mean, if you look at what he's actually said, right? Laughable that he's not part of the political scene or whatever that quote was. That's insane. That makes no sense at all. That's just a complete fabrication. He, in fact, is a Cuomo, as you said, right? So he is a very strong structure in that scene. But if you even hear in his apology, which is this idea of casting himself as this clumsy guy, right? And in fact, the women misinterpret it. I'm sorry, I'm clumsy, I'm, the male bumbler. And actually, maybe they misunderstood. Maybe they're the ones who didn't really understand, as opposed to, hey, she's 25 and you're making sexually explicit comments to her as a 62-year-old, making it pretty clear, at least from her storytelling, that you want to have sex with her. Completely inappropriate. So I am all for some kind of investigation. I think it'll be absolutely fascinating. He talked about cancel culture, too, which, again, could embrace a Republican talking point. But I'll say this, very rarely do we care about the cancel culture of the women who leave politics because it's so upsetting to them. We never fret about the cancel culture of those people who never got to rise or who were so upset and so driven out that they just left. We care less about them. So, listen, I am all for an investigation of the governor. I think he certainly deserves it. And I think it probably will spell out very clearly what he's done.